Good morning. Welcome back to the meeting. Before we start with the presentations, I would like to give you opening day remarks. Let me just say that first, as opening day remarks, two logistics issue. One is there will be a press conference outside here between 10 and 10:30. So please do not go out from these two doors between 10 and 10:30. If you need to restrooms, you can go out that door and there are restrooms in the open area. Of course, we'll have a break at certain point, but it's not going to bother the press conference. The other important thing is that today there is a big conference, I think, in the CVC. So at 3 o'clock, the CVC will close the doors of the CVC. So if you go out for lunch, make sure you come back. Well, you come back at 2:30 because we start. But anyway, if you are delayed, do not come after 3 p.m. because otherwise we won't be able to get you in again. Now, I'm going to discuss 10 minutes, 5 minutes, what is going to happen today. What I would like that today's outcome. First of all, there are in this room between 15 and 16 chambers. I'm saying between 15 and 16 chambers, parliamentary legislative bodies, because we actually have the UK Parliament, for example, the service, the parliamentary ICT, serving 2 chambers. Same with Uruguay. Is one ICT group serving 2 chambers. So counting the chambers, we arrive to 16. What we would like to do today is, first of all, understand where they are in terms of XML, in terms of open document standards. And so I have asked all the presenters to make an effort and not to be focused on the topic of the session, of the title of the session. Title of the session serves only for the debate following the presentations. So each parliament is possibly asked to present either the status of XML in general or some projects that they want to highlight in terms of innovation. Why we do this is because time is always a constraint. So we want to learn about, and we hope that parliaments will learn about each other, as well as focus on certain topics in the discussion. So the first discussion will be on XML schemas, the second on XML editors, but we will also give few minutes for questions and answers to the presenters, of course. And by doing that, we hope to see and identify during the discussions and looking at the presentation some common challenges or common tools or identify or have consensus on certain issues that we want to take forward in the future. I think that from yesterday meeting, we already have, there are many issues that emerged from the meeting, but in particular to today's discussion, I think one issue, for example, was that yes, open document standards is good for transparency, but it's also good for the operations of the parliament, actually, for the efficiency of the internal operation of the parliament, and for exchanging documents between offices and with other institutions. and we look at transparency from the point of view of cost, and I think that Ms. Astrup gave us a very good reverse or a different angle, saying, well, you know, if you do not use open document standard for transparency, you actually do it in a more expensive way and less efficient way. So that's another way to see it. So I'm now calling the first two presenters to join me. Is Joan Miller, Director of Parliamentary ICT of the UK Parliament, and Roberto Bustos Latorre, Director of Communication and Technology of the Senate of Chile. So, first panel is always the most difficult, so good luck. And please, Joan, you have the floor.
Amazed yesterday at the strength and depth of some of the initiatives that parliaments have taken, and I'm just going to take you briefly through what we've been trying to do in the UK Parliament, where we have been very much engaged in trying to work out the future, trying to settle ourselves into that future and provide services for people who work in Parliament, for the people who are the parliamentarians, and for the public. And I put it in all of those perspectives. And I can take you back just a few years to 2005. And 2005 was when I joined the UK Parliament. And this was when we centralised IT and began to look at it as a more consistent product rather than little bits of products that sat around the organisation. It was when we joined the two IT departments from the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and indeed within those houses we joined the departments. When I joined and I started talking about electronic papers, and people thought I ought to cool off in a quiet corner somewhere and not get quite so excited about these electronic stuff, because people use paper, and paper was the product of Parliament. And so talking about electronic paper at that point was quite adventurous for people, I think. Thought I was mad. They think I'm mad now when I talk about holograms in Parliament, but, you know, another 20 years' time, I think we could see that. So IT was locked down. It was a product that was delivered to people. There was not much flexibility. But if I look at the world today, and we look at the predictions and trends of the world today in IT, it's about mobile devices. It's about these things. It's about smartphones. It's about people who are using data and they're using it as they move around. It's about using data in a much more flexible way into knowledge space, into communication space, into watching video. So we've had to adapt our systems to all of these things. It's also about changes. And changes, we are, look at the prediction of change in IT every 18 months. In fact, some people say it's every 12 months. In fact, to me, it seems like every 5 months when our members come in with another new idea. And it's about, therefore, not being focused on what we do now, but in a few months' time, what will people be asking us to do? So we're looking very much at what our users want. Thought just for fun I'd show you our system from 700 years ago. This is not electronic, you can see that. It's when paper was vellum, and we put our axe onto what is basically cow skins, and the indexing there is made of paper. So that's how our 700 years of our history is recorded, and it fills the whole tower in the Palace of Westminster. We're moved on a little bit from that. In the House of Commons, you can see here the most common thing that people use is paper. And the reason that they use paper is because no members have a dedicated seat in that chamber. We have 652 members, and we probably have about 400 seats if people squeeze up along the benches. So if it's a busy house like this house is, you will see that some members have to stand. That means we can't put equipment to the desk labelled with someone's name. Now, back in 2005, people were not allowed electronic equipment in the chamber. In fact, it's only the last 12 months that officially people have been allowed to use their smartphones and indeed iPads in the chamber. And some 200 MPs now use these devices. And they use them for their notes, for their papers that they get through the internet and intranet. But we're still quite a predominance of paper-based. And paper is easy for people to use. They can write on it. They can feel it, they can scan it. And so use of paper is still sort of many people's first habit, I suppose. But yet, if you look around Parliament, the place we work, and in this picture you can see over on the right-hand side, big atrium in Portcullis House, that's the cafe bar. That's where people really do their business. They sit around tables there, they have their refreshments there, their cup of coffee there, and they work. They do the deals that makes politics work. If you look in the equivalent in the Lord's End down at the bottom, there's another place where peers sit and work. They sit and they negotiate, they meet their colleagues, they meet staff, and they make some big decisions in those places. All these places we've had to Wi-Fi. And you can see up on the top left of the picture, that's not actually, our members have not got that young. That's actually the Youth Parliament meeting in the House of Commons. You can see even they've got paper. But we have Wi-Fi'd that as well. In committee rooms. This is a committee room in Portcullis House. And you can see that we've got two witnesses down at the bottom. You might recognise the guy on the right. That's Rupert Murdoch, has been questioned by one of the committees about his paper's activities. I know up in the top right-hand side, there's an MP called Tom Watson, who is particularly aware of the social networking world, connecting with the public. He is a very big Twitterer, not a twit, but a Twitterer, and he engages with the public through that social media mechanism. And yet he's still using paper in his committee room. And people transport large amounts of paper around the estate, even though the way they work is very mobile. It's in an environment where they are never at their desk. You can never catch them on the phone at their desk. You can always catch them on their mobile phones, except when they're voting, of course. This is a gratuitous slide. I just thought I'd show Obama came and visited us, and we had a grand speech in Westminster Hall, another place where we've had to put Wi-Fi. But as well as us talking to each other and using the papers for the parliamentary purpose, members of the public also want to talk to us. You can see that some members of the public, a bit angry about the proposed new airports, runways at Heathrow, actually got on the roof to tell us what they thought and put big banners down the outside of Parliament so we could hardly miss their view. You can see down on the bottom right-hand side, for many years we had a protest about the war in Iraq. And that protest is again people, the public, wanting to talk to parliamentarians. And we were wondering, how can we make this a bit more flexible? How can we allow people to be able to talk to politicians without that great big challenge of overloading politicians with emails, with comments, with stuff, so much stuff that they can't respond to it. In fact, there was a debate very recently on welfare rights. And in that debate, there is a disagreement between the politicians, and the politicians who are likely to oppose the debate were flooded by emails from the public, from lobby groups, to the extent that they couldn't individually respond. They felt they ought to, but they couldn't individually respond. So our challenge is to find an electronic mechanism where politicians can talk to the public without there being an environment where they have to deal one-on-one with all those people. So in our looking at what customers want now and where we are now, people want to use electronic data. They want to use their own choice of mobile device. For the last 2 years, we've had mobile devices that people could use and connect to the parliamentary data without being certified and locked down by our own systems. We put that in a secure environment. They want to be working on the move. Most of our politicians are not stationary people. They always want to be connected to their calendar and the internet. They always want to be connected to the knowledge and the business papers. They want to use their own applications and apps. And they want IT to work all the time, every time, the moment they press the button on. That's quite a hard task, isn't it? So I'm just going to do a little bit of crowd gazing of what next. So what's happened in the UK Parliament? Why are we looking now at the papers and the way we are looking at them? Well, fundamentally, what has happened is two things. And sometimes when you plan and you vision and you do all these things, the whole thing is blown out of the water by events. And the events that have happened to us is, firstly, we had an election in May 2010, so it's nearly 2 years ago. And a third of the House of Commons changed its membership. The age of the House of Commons, average age, went down considerably. 100 new peers were elected or appointed to the House of Lords. So we had a change in membership that caused significant change in demand of what we did and what we provided. And then the other thing that happened in June 2010 is on the UK market, these things came out. Massive change of attitude of people using electronic devices in the chamber, in committee rooms, because these are less obtrusive. And the deciding factor seems to be, firstly, these products are tactile, they're easy to use, they have all the human factors designed in that make it easy for people who are not electronically smart. These things cause a barrier. If you're sitting around a committee, our chairman, one of the chairmen of the Commons Committee that looks specifically IT, was very against laptops. Because if you put a screen between him as a chair and his committee, he feels detached. He feels the flow of conversation doesn't work. So I was sitting discussing this with him, and I showed him the iPad, and I said, "What about that?" And he was immediately in favour. And so we've been experimenting with iPads as electronic paper in two committees, one in the House of Commons, one in the House of Lords, across an age range that is IT born to IT really rather afraid. And without exception, people in those committees have been using these iPads for their committee meetings, completely, not printing paper at all. This is where the savings come in, Gerardo. This is where we have, in one committee, we've done the assessment that by giving iPads, and I was sitting around talking with this committee just a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking around the committee, and there were about 12 people at the committee. 11 of them just had their iPads. There were 6 pieces of paper across the 11 desks. There was one who had his stack of paper in front of him. He'd just joined the committee, not been issued his iPad yet. The other people who've left the committee have taken their iPads with them, and I can't get them back. People have transferred from being paper-driven to being electronic paper-driven. They've made the jump. Across all experience groups, they've made that jump. And the other committee in the House of Lords is a similar experience, except when I sat around with them, there was only one piece of paper printed across the whole committee. They were all using their iPads. So that significant swap in just 6 months of habits, of stacks of paper to an iPad, has saved, for that particular committee, just on printing costs alone, £2,000 a year. It saved a lot more on time and effort. Instead of collating 60 stacks of paper, the committee clerk now collates 3 sets of papers. Instead of circulating 60 sets of papers, they circulate 3 sets of papers. So we are making savings as we make the investment. So what next then? Well, the kind of things that they're using are marked up paper. So this is a picture of just one of the committee reports, and on it you can see written notes. This is not a photograph, this is electronically derived notes. So people feel at home with the electronic paper. We're looking at and are developing our core house papers into new formats. We used to have a stack of Word templates that we used. We're now moving into much more open data sets. And we're doing it section and function by function. But when we have done those functions, this is a mock-up of what we will be able to do on an iPad. Because iPad seems to be the preferred mechanism for our members, our users, to be able to see the products that we have. So this page gives you, in different sections of the page, scrollable items. So in the middle item, you see we've got oral questions. Over on the left, you've got a calendar that you can choose the date that you're looking at. Above that is the element that you want to look at. On the right, we have the annunciator that tells you where the business is at any time, and you can scroll up and down that to see the times. And below that, there's the messaging function, so that if you're sitting in the chamber, the clerks can be talking to the sergeant or to each other electronically. So we have a multifunctional type of product. We can only do that because we've loosened up the data. This is another view of the same data. These data sets now become multifunctional, so we can see them and use them in different ways. And over on the right-hand side, we would have a list of members and their photographs. We have the ability to author a new bill amendment in this case. So we can choose who the person is going to be, and we can write in the text of the amendment. So that's another way to look at the same data. This is yet another way to look at the same data, and this particular page shows you the events of the day in the chamber. So you can scroll that right-hand section left and right. If you scroll left, you'll see the questions and EDMs, early day motions for the day. If you're coming right, you can see the debates in the chamber. If you press on the debates in the chamber, well, if you see over to the right, you can see where the day's agenda has stopped. So over on the right, that little panel on the right-hand side is empty because that event hasn't happened yet. So the events are feeding into these little squares, little tablets, as they are made, as they're constructed. And if you go into one of those events, you can see we have the written text, which is the equivalent of the Hansard text, and over on the right, in fact, it is the Hansard text. And over on the right, you can see that we have the broadcast. We have the video and broadcast. And underneath that, we put the marker so that people can put their particular speech onto their own website. MPs can do that. And if you hit on any one of those pictures, those speeches in the debate, it'll come up with the actual live broadcast in that top left-hand bit. It's another way to look at the data. So the reason and the purpose of all the stuff that we're doing is to gain that kind of flexibility, to be able for our users to be able to use and be comfortable with different views of the data. But it has another purpose as well. And this is the efficiency gain out of being able to do all of these things in a much more open format. It allows us to both suit the workings of our Parliament, to suit the workings of the people who work in Parliament to create the data, to suit the workings of the members who are now using these new devices to carry their papers around with them, to carry their knowledge stores around with them, and to carry their communication stores around with them. But it also allows us to export that. Haven't done it yet, but we will very soon have data.parliament in a full function where we'll be able to publish this data into an open site. You can find it on the internet site, but we'll be posting it as it happens, not exactly as it happens, but as we publish it, which is very close to as it happens, into the data stores that people want to use. Now, the good news story behind all of this is that as part of centralizing and focusing our efforts, we've been able to centralize and focus the technology behind it. So over the last 5 years, we've made somewhere in the region of 12% savings on our budget. That's cash out of the budget. Over the next 2 years, as we continue on this vein, and as we look at different storage mechanisms, we'll be saving another 10% of budget. So we'll be up to 22, 23% of budget savings. That's cash out of the budget. It's not taking account of inflation and setting still. It's actually savings out of the budget. And at the same time, give more functionality to people. And part of those savings are, to be truthful, are about storage. Partly it's about not printing. And partly it's about people working in different ways. All of these things become true if you allow for the devices and you match the functionality of the devices with the functionality of what you can do with the products you develop. Probably I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quite interesting. So now going to, before we open the questions, we'll listen to the second presenter. It's Roberto Bustos Latorre, Director of Communication and Technology of the Senate of Chile. You have the floor.
Good morning, all the people. First, as I say thanks for the invitation for me and for my college to the U.S. Congress, to the ITC, and to IPU. I say excuse for my English. I don't speak well, but I try with my best effort to understand me. My issue is the markup system of session diaries in the Senate. First, a little introduction. We believe in the quality in law process. It's an essential factor or requirement of good governance. The transparency of this process and its control are essential to improve the accountability and reduce corruption. Nowadays, greater attention is being paid to strengthen economic management institutions beyond the executive power and improve accountability mechanisms. The new trend, the emerging global trends, existing of state agencies that are legally authorized and empowered to take control measures or challenges in relation to acts or commission by other state agents has allowed the incorporation of more information and transparency in your system, using the institutional website. In many countries, including Chile, has developed a management control system. They face the challenge of making more efficient allocation of law process and public research. We believe that government requires progress in specific areas, such as transparency. A little reflection in that point. Yesterday, all the people speak about transparency, about it's necessary to define transparency. I agree with this position. In Chile, we have a law 2 or 3 years ago about the transparency. The law defined 2 types of transparency: the active transparency and non-active transparency. The public agent, the public organization, the Secretary of State need put the lay say to need put in the website all the information about the agency, all the information about budget, about staff, and about function, about resolution. This is the active transparency. No active transparency is the possibility of the citizen, all citizens, ask to the institution, and the institution respond in a number of the day, in the number of the day would the law indicate. If the public institution no respond, the citizen go to the council and ask to, how do you say obligar? Obliged to the public agency for response to the citizen. This is our defining to transparency. Well, total access, other progress required, total access for citizens in the process of creation of law with minor exemption, with secretary, for example. Information transparency and management or fiscal resource and participation in budget process and public management by result. That is possible if the website contains all parliamentary information with document in machine readable format and use open document standard. Now, this issue is the markup system of session diary. In the Chilean Congress has been a tradition to keep the citizen about the formation process of the law. An example of an effort to try to capture the knowledge of user in order to share it with citizen is the markup system of session diaries. The personnel of the drafting office had not automated system in access selectively the speaker and the matter discussed during the session of Senate. To take advantage of this cognitive work, we developed the application mentioned above, which allowed then within the normal process of writing of the official version, marked document with preset option, which the system convert to XML markup. The tool has several modules, each with a specific task, management and multimedia markup. XML markup. XML system is used to mark text in a session. Marks previously defined allow you to structure the text of the meeting and streamline and timely search information. Place emphasis on greater relevance and public interest point, among other assistant effort treated. Result votes, intervention of parliamentaries, and other agreement adopted. Speeches. By the interest or parliamentary speeches, another speech during the floor session, the system of market, XML markup, is used to rescue them from the text of the official version and make its publicly available on the website of the Senate. The most important aspect of the exhibition are market. The process model for automatic drafting daily session, the process of the mark is in the yellow color. Edition, reviewer, publication office, in the left side, markup session check, control markup session, translate to XML, and publish in the web service portal of the website Senate. The mark system plug first in Word over on document. In the right side is the intervention of the senator, and in the left side you have the system of the mark. Other slide is the same, the intervention at the left and the word mark in the right. After this process, the staff translate Word XML to XML Session Daily. It's an application development for our staff. The system architecture of this application is markup XML system in Word, file servers, and put in the Oracle database. The Oracle database translates to XML, go to database Oracle, and put in the web service, and the web service put in the Senate website. This is query and daily session, another slide. Indexing daily of session. Query intervention by senator. Other intervention by senator. Show intervention in a large brief discussion of a bill on a session diary. This is a lot of slides, the way of I show you in the website, in our website. Challenges. In the last time, we implemented a web service platform, has back office for the interoperability of system providing citizen service and those that perform information retrieval directly from database sources. For example, our legislative processing system is automatized a lot of years ago. Now, in other challenges, is in June this year, the service platform will be extended to our front office in order to provide directly data service in XML format to the citizen. Finally, we said that our goal is that across all departments and office of our institution, issue your information in open data format, so as to provide the public all information that exists in our institution, so as to allow greatest possible transparency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roberto, if you can come back on my right, so we can open to, let's say we have 10 minutes of questions to the two panelists. So keep it short and simple so they can respond right away in short and simple. And then we open up the debate on XML schemas. So let's have first questions to the two panelists. There are already two. First Canada, then Jeff Griffith.
Hi, this is a question for Joan. You said that you made 10% saving, very interesting for me, and especially I suppose from paper. And I know that paper budget is not in the IT shop. Have you got some back from that? Or are you planning to get some back? Because you need to invest and you need to sustain this investment.
Let's take the question first.
Jeff Griffith, again for Joan. Joan, are all of the documents that you're presenting on the iPad now in XML formats? Are there any that are not? And if they're not, are you still able to present them on the iPad?
Italy.
Questions, specific questions concerning the way in which MP in England, in Great Britain, present their Parliamentary Act. I saw a specific slide. What kind of authentication you provide in this case? You need a simple authentication with a password or a strong authentication with some other system?
Mr. Schumann?
Just a quick question, really more for Joan. Have you projected out what the Parliament-wide cost savings would be if you were to extend what's going on in the committees to everyone?
I think you have 4 questions, so you can start responding to the 4 questions.
I can see it's all about the money, isn't it? 10%, have we got it back? What we have is a delay in giving it back. So that allows us the investment to do the next bit. So in the original savings that we made, to be frank, that was about investment in our infrastructure. And the savings from that, some of that went back. We were also given £1 million a year to invest in R&D. We're also giving money to invest in the procedural data programs. So in effect, the money that we gave back funds the research and the next piece of development, but it goes through the finance people before we get it back. Also, as part of that getting it back, it very much involves the business coming up with the proposals, if it's an application. So you see in the back here Simon Nichols, you will also see John Pullinger, and you'll see Chris Johnson from the UK Parliament. All of them, business side. Simon recently come over to our ICT side. But business side people who are working with the requirements and therefore hold the funding and work with us as ICT partners in order to invest the money on behalf of Parliament to make the changes. Doesn't have to sit in our budget. I have to tell you, Sufyan, we got that model from the Canadian Parliament. We thought that was very well managed there, and we've been developing it, our ideas around that very much in the UK Parliament, so thank you for that tip. We also, and John will have told you yesterday about PICTAB, which is our advisory body, which sits with membership of both management boards to look at the priorities across both boards and across both houses of Parliament. And they prioritise the investment on what we put our efforts into next. And at that point, they decide where the money we've saved and the other budgets that are being saved, like our printing budget, where that is focused for the next round of projects. Interestingly, the projection on costs, I think you mentioned, and I think the other question about costs was about, do we know how much it will save overall? We can see the money in our budget. We know very clearly what we can do on the money in our budget. But there are other departments in both houses who are also making savings, and we have a great cohesive effort in both houses by the finance directors to look at the benefits deriving from the activity that the business-led projects are engaged in. So, for instance, that when I talk about the 12% savings that we've made in IT, in the printing budget, there's been at least a 15% budget on not printing papers. And some of that is due to the IT. Some of it is about just not printing papers that nobody ever read. So it's a combination. But we look at it as a whole, rather than just an IT-focused. It's an enabler rather than the whole picture. If we did a projection on £2,000 per committee, and we are madly trying to work that out at the minute, because we are in the middle of big savings programmes in the UK Parliament, both houses. We also have the driver from members who want us to buy them iPads in order to fund those savings, so they also want to know the savings. But we haven't done those projections. But my projection, my personal expectation is you can take that 2,000 in printing costs, you can multiply it by 40 committees, and so that's your immediate saving just on the cost of toner cartridges. The other question that I have was, are all documents in XML? And if not, can you present on an iPad? I think that was the question. Probably it's a bit of an admission here in an XML conference is that we don't just use XML. We publish into other formats as well. So no is the answer. The other question that I had was about authentication on our bills products. Well, I have to say that we haven't made as much progress on bills as we have on other products. And what we were showing you is a schema of where we hope to get to, but not where we are at the minute. Currently, we have, and it's fairly long existence, maybe 10 years or more existence, we have a product that sits across government and in Parliament that frames bills. And I say frames because it's called FrameMaker system that we use. And in that product that we use for bills, there is authentication at the password level for people who are using those, but it goes across from government. Same system goes across into the House of Commons and into the House of Lords and tracks and follows the bills as it's being drafted and as it's being amended at the moment. But we are talking with government. We're not trying to move our own systems away from that joined up look at legislation because it's very positive, that joined up piece of work. We are talking with government and departments as to how we can take that next format into more open standards.
Is there any additional questions to the panelists? I have one question to the Senate of Chile. I understand that at the moment XML is used for the session diaries and markup of videos. But you said in your presentation that in June you intend to have plans to extend the use of XML. Can you elaborate? Can you say something about your plans? How is the decision already taken, or and there is a plan for extending XML?
Yes, the decision is in the put our best effort for open data format and in all kind of document or other type of information like video media, video in the section, video in the commission, and all the information possibly put in a standard open format. I believe it's necessary a global standard format, but all the world use it, one standard format.
Thank you so much. We have one question from Tom Bruce, Cornell University.
Joan, I'm curious as to, you described a number of applications and a rapid pace of applications development for the iPad. I'm wondering if the change in the pace and nature of the applications you're developing is pushing you toward a shift in how you think about your underlying data models. Either of you, actually.
I get used to this technology eventually. Absolutely it is, yes. And I was referred to it earlier. IT changes, and it changes every month, and it changes every year, and the products that you use and the way you access those products changes all the time. So yes, we have been through already 2 design decisions. We have a big program which is about changing the parliamentary papers, and we've been through 2 design decisions in the last 18 months that have shifted our thinking as to how we create and store and stock and present data. And I've absolutely no doubt we'll go through more design decisions in the next 2 years as we continue to produce new ways of looking at the data.
And would you characterize that shift as being more document-centric or less document-centric?
Less document-centric.
And more towards?
More towards workflow and thinking of the automation of the process, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I close the question and answer session for the panelists, but try to open up the debate on XML schemas. Actually, the comment from Roberto Bustos from, on a standard makes it a little bit easier. I know that up there are two persons who wants to start the discussion because they are into XML schema. So let me give the floor to Flavio first. Flavio Zeni is a colleague in the United Nations, and he works in Nairobi. Many of you knows him, and so Flavio.
No, first I don't have an iPad, and not even an iPhone. And I really think that we shouldn't talk about, we're not promoting brand here. If one has to mention something, should say tablets, not unless you're sponsored by a company. And that said, when we are talking about schema, I just wanted to say, our project was in Africa, Africa 53 country, have at least 3 different legal traditions, as the Anglo-Saxon kind of the Westminster tradition, as the Francophone tradition, and the Portuguese tradition that is quite close, let's say, to the Francophone. So there are 2 different traditions. We have at least 3 major languages. So as United Nations, we were thinking, how can we deal with this? How can we try to help Parliament to develop their own this schema? What is the right approach? And we were talking about 2004, 2005, when even developed Parliament were not really thinking so much about XML. And so we were often looked like, you're just mad, and you're doing the wrong thing. But there was already a precedent before. Maybe tomorrow I will talk more about it. But there was already an initiative that started in 2000 that is called Parl XML. That it was coming from the European Parliament that had the same problem. They have to deal with documents from different traditions, from different parliaments, for different languages. And even for them, this explosion of schema wouldn't have made sense. It was impossible to handle, impossible to manage, actually. So we, through the help of experts, we came up with the idea to develop not a schema, but a meta schema. And then, before I say something wrong, I give the floor to Fabio, that is with Monica Palmirani, are the 2 lead consultants on this.
Hello. Well, with this introduction, it's kind of hard to follow through with the idea of saying something really interesting and meaningful. But the point is that within this project, the M&M and Comentoso, as we were sponsored by, I'm just joking. No, we had no sponsors. Again, the basic idea was to focus on a few very important issues here. Most importantly, the long-term preservation from my point of view. So with this in mind, the kind of audience we were aiming at, rather than being, say, the MPs or those people that live with the workflow and act within the workflow of the legislation process is to have a much wider perspective that would allow not just the daily routine of the parliament to be managed and handled, but also to keep and leave a long-term track record of what happened, why, by whom, in what sense, in a manner that could be made technology independent. So one of the topic of discussion from my point of view here is that whenever a new technology arises and becomes prevalent and universal and required and obligatory and fashionable, in many cases, in many situations, the tendency, especially of the technical people, is to embrace it and start producing software and tools and solutions directly connected and focused on that specific technology. I think we tried on purpose. Actually, Accomantoso is, to me, the third generation effort in that regard, and I've been going through several evolutionary changes in the technology were based on. I started with SGML, and every tool we created in SGML were thrown away when XML came out, and we had to redo the things again and again and again and again. So the idea was, well, why don't we separate consistently and strongly the tools that people use to do stuff, both to produce documents and to use them and to live with them and so on, from the actual things that we are discussing with, which are the documents, which are meant to be alive for much longer. From my point of view, the issue of permanence, of long-term preservation, is the key aspect whenever we're dealing with. I mean, this is not, the workflow of the legislative process is just a very minor part of the importance of the legislative systems. These are things that are meant to stay with us for a very long time and to affect our lives for a very long time. And being able to make sure that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, people will still be able to make use of these documents and possibly study what happened to these documents and who did what, when, for what reason, under which assumption, after which discussion, to me this is very important.
In all this in machine-readable format, of course.
Thank you. Anyone wants to follow on that ideas or add? Yes, Joan?
I absolutely do agree that, Flavio, can I just take your rebuke? I won't use the word, did I use the word iPad or device? I won't. I do agree it's any product. It just so happens for us, the artifact in June 2010 was this product. And we haven't found one that members will adopt as readily as they do this one. But you should be comforted by the fact that our development team are very split between the Apple side and the Android side. Very few into Microsoft, I have to say. So let me just tackle the issue of preservation. And we do have a intense investment and project looking at digital preservation, all types. It's preserving our website, preserving our documents, and preserving the core data sets. So yes, I do agree that has to be the first emphasis when you think to the future, is to how are you going to read it in 100 years? And you can think with our history. I don't want to be the person who says, oh, and it stopped in 2010.
Tim Arnold-Moore from SAIC. I've built systems in, I think it's 6 or 7 jurisdictions now, based on SGML and XML, including the LIM system in Canada and some systems in Tasmania and Australian Parliament, and recently worked on the US code in XML. And I think a number of the speakers have hit on the real reason why you want to use open standards, and that is so you don't get tied down to technology. The system that we're using in Tasmania has been in production since 1996. It's using SGML because that's what was available at the time. XML came around in 1998. But we haven't changed the data since then. We've changed tools a number of times. In particular, we use a Word-based authoring environment. So we've been through, I think, 7 versions of Word in that time. But the data hasn't changed. So that's one of the main reasons why open standards gives you that flexibility. You can change tools without changing your data. And these documents last a long time. I don't need to tell anybody from England that. You're looking at documents from the 12th century that are part of your legislation. And that's the case in most jurisdictions.
One of the things that I think is often talked about as machine readable, but I think human readable is an important aspect of any publishing. And the standard that is most used on the web is HTML. And with HTML5, especially the ability to embed microdata, microformats, and RDFA and those types of things is increasing. And so whether or not there's an underlying SGML or XML format, there can always be a good XSLT to bring things into HTML, and quite often it will be the HTML that average civil society folks use, and even apps developers. So you can expose the XML. I think that's important if it is the underlying, but that you should standardize on think about standardizing on HTML. You probably already are, but think about putting as much into that, whether it's having permanent URLs, having the ability to cite into it, and always show the path back to the original format that you have and as documented as well as you can, because it may be that there are lots of civil society folks who are screen scraping and find that the best way, and the more you can take from whatever underlying code and transform it into the HTML, whether it's using schema.org or RDFA, ontologies, et cetera, I think will be helpful.
Canada?
Yeah. I want to go back to the subject, the schemas and XML, and share with you some of our personal experience. We started in XML in 1999, and everybody in this room who is in that XML schema word must probably work with us. We have a friend here from Montreal, and now I recall another friend who just spoke. And at that time, yes, there is about 5 or 6 in the world who know XML and can do something with it, and there is about 1,000 who can speak about it. 12 years later.
We're just laughing because it's so true.
Yeah. 12 years later, we have most probably state-of-the-art XML schemas, complex as anything can be. 12 years later, we think we used maybe 5% of the complexity. Then if anybody starting here today in XML, focus on our hierarchy of standardized schema that exist. HTML is not bad, very good. I think what you just said is extremely well. And after that, I think what Flavio said, it's a bit complex to share the idea, but if I understood it, is to have maybe an umbrella that characterize your parliament and the differences. But at the end of the day, a bill or a Hansard or whatever we do is paragraphs of bold, italic, indented, all that stuff. Cover it with something that say this is a motion, this is a clause, this is a bill. Then make it easy. Make it very easy and try to reuse existing intelligence. If you want to make your stuff open, the biggest, when we speak about preservation, the biggest challenge is not the XML. The XML will stay forever, forever and ever. The problem is to do something with it intelligent. And when we speak about a document, and even though we speak a digitized document in the past, today we speak about digital information, it's how to present it. And to present it, you need, you said XSLT, well, you need to have that XSLT working either in open source or non-open source, whatever platform. Then you may have a very complex, rich XML that nobody can do anything with it 100 years down the road, okay? Or you can have a very simple XML that everybody can do something with it. And I think that's what open data means. It's more open standards and easy to reuse by anybody, not a PhD student in a laboratory of a university, anybody. And that's where I would say schema of today should not be what schema 10 years ago are, and should not become a thesis of a PhD of what the Hansard should look like. We spent about a year bringing proceduralists to discuss about what should be on a bill, what should be on a Hansard, what should be in a committee report. I think that's where the biggest complex area you should focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Fabio?
Being on exactly the opposite table, I find it interesting and worrying that the fashion is moving in that direction. From my point of view, using a simple tool to do complicated stuff has only the advantage of simplifying the work and the creation, not by removing the complexity, but by moving it at the end of the line, at the users, at 100 years from now, when people will be using these documents. I am afraid that HTML and microdata and RDFA are a simpler way to create documents, but are simpler because basically they do not allow the creator of the document, those that for which the documents are live and known, to concretely place the relevant information in the right way. HTML doesn't allow explicit structure, explicit naming of the structure, purpose-oriented vocabularies, and so on. RDFA is not concretely, it's just immersed in the structure of the document. And for this reason, tools are easier to produce because basically you're dealing with, as you said, paragraphs and lists and bolds and italics, but you're not dealing with sections, subsections, and books and tomes and articles and clauses and so on. You are dealing with presentation-oriented stuff. And you are putting on top of that possibly with an ontology or not necessarily with an ontology, just a sparse number of semantic annotation that are not directly connected with the structure of the document. This is, from my point of view, an easy approach, but I won't be here 100 years from now, and probably many of us will not be here. But my fear is that whenever you are letting your final user do the interpretation of what actually means that there is a bold here, or that there is a new line there, or that there is this specific typographical annotation here, if you let the reader do the interpretation, you are not making sure that the interpretation will be correct. Or maybe you are forcing people 100 years from now to use exactly the same typographical annotations that you are using now, because changing them would be too difficult for the legacy documents. From my point of view, interpreting the documents when they are created is better than letting the final readers interpret it.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two interventions. Daniel Poulain first, and then eCitizen Foundation. I don't know.
First of all, I don't disagree that complexity of those things can exist right now in HTML. My point was that regardless of what is behind the scenes, one, it should be exposed, and two, there should be an effort to make sure that it's presentation. But when you talked about the meaning of things, I think that's an important thing to get at because it's potentially dangerous. And it is dangerous in this sense. It's a great thing to have there for people who do research and people who analyze and create search tools, but is it the case that when a member of parliament votes on something, they understand what the underlying code means, and therefore what is written and how it's presented is actually what gets interpreted, not the underlying code, unless there's some change. In the United States, it's what gets printed out, and the way it gets printed out is very important. So that is actually what the law is for most societies. There may be societies in the future that where the members of parliament actually understand the ontologies underneath everything and make decisions based on that. But for now, they mainly use whatever language the vernacular is, the official language of their country, et cetera, to create these documents. The XML is a fantastic tool. There should be standardization, but I think that's something that should be thought about when we think about the greatness of XML.
Thank you. Please, Daniel.
Very briefly, I think that if the concern is the preservation, probably that the HTML will have the same value for preservation that the XML. I think it's independent of the tool, it will be preserved. If our concern is how emphasis will be interpreted 100 years down the road, I would not say that I don't care, but even the XML schema may be misinterpreted, let's say 50 years from here. I think that in the Parliament, like in Canada, to use XML, it's not, I have nothing against that. I am very positive that they are doing that. I am very favorable with that. I think it enhances their work, and it's very wise to do that. My concern is I'm not sure that XML is the right way to go in any circumstances. I think that when you have a lot of difficulty even to have to keep a paper track of your proceeding in the Parliament, maybe the most important thing is to have something, to keep something. And despite that we all agree that Word is terrible and everything, I think anything is better than nothing. Okay, if you could keep track of what is said and what motion are adopted, it's the very right thing to go. The most persuasive argument I heard in favor of pushing XML everywhere in the developing world, for instance, was given to me by Tom Bruce. He said, "You look, if people in many countries, if they are all using XML and the same XML schema, maybe we will see that there will be many sources of expertise to help them with that technology and those approach and those schema." Maybe Tom is right in saying that, but I wonder if in some very difficult circumstances, if using XML is the right way to go. If you're in a poor country and you have a lot of difficulty, let's say, to manage the essential, if you must absolutely go right there. I wonder.
I have to stop this conversation and go to the next panel. I'm sure we will continue throughout the day with this. So keep your questions or comments in mind. I know Flavio would like to respond to this last comment, and I know Flavio will have a presentation tomorrow. So all of that. So let me thank the two presenters, Joan Miller and Roberto Bustos Latorre. So a round of applause for them because I think they deserve it. And let me call Claudio Fabiani and Ashok Hariharan here for the next presentations. Meanwhile, while they come down, yes, we take a picture, but Mr. Timothy Arnold, you can go ahead with your comment.
I agree with everything Danielle said. I've built a system in a third world country with XML, Papua New Guinea. The reason why we used XML was because they had no staff to maintain consolidated legislation. The reason why we used XML was because we could automate it all. So all they have to do is draft, and we take care of the rest automatically. When you have tools available like that, you can actually reduce costs for smaller countries with less resources. The first jurisdiction I worked in was Tasmania, 400,000 people. It's not necessarily a high-cost solution. It can actually be a solution that reduces costs, but you have to choose your markup for the purpose. The purpose for consolidation means you have to have containment for your markup. When you're working in Parliament and your focus is on publishing the results of what Parliament's doing, containment isn't as important. And in fact, in Canada, they use containment on one side in the Department of Justice, and they adopt a much flatter model with markup on the Parliament side, and move between the two of them back when they publish the results. So it's a question of choosing the right markup for the right solution, and you need to be flexible.
All right. Are you okay? So, since I think we should not consider this, it's one day, one whole session. So, let me just give the floor to Claudio Fabiani. Claudio Fabiani is the IT project manager of a program actually called eParliament in the Directorate General on Innovation and Technological Support of the European Parliament. So, please, Claudio.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I will go through a very short presentation, and then I'm taking some risk. I try to make a live demo of two systems that are quite representative of a good usage of XML. So I'm from European Parliament. I will first introduce a little bit the business between the different institutions. Here you have a picture of the European Commission main building on the right side. On the bottom side you have the European Parliament, on the left side you have the European Council. So we work together. The European Commission is the initiator. They prepare the proposal that are sent to the European Parliament, and then we approve, reject, or either amend the proposal. And then these amended proposals, they are submitted to the Council, who will approve, reject, or amend as well. And then we can go for a second reading. And in the end, we come with the joint text. I have some figure about the European Parliament. We have around 753 members today, with 1,230 assistants for these members and 4,000 civil servants. Most important, we have and we work daily with 23 official languages. And we have more than 1,000 translators working on these documents every day. And we translate an average of 6,500 pages per day. We have a backlog of 5 million documents, and we treat around 450 procedures per year. And for each procedure, we go through the translation in 23 languages. So what I'm going to present today is the eParliament program that started a few years before. And actually what we are doing, we are moving from a system based on Word and the traditional file system towards web interfaces, XML documents, and databases. We touch these main activities that are the reception of proposal coming from the European Commission. Then we go through a transformation process because In fact, and this is the main point, we use the XML version of the proposal as an input to our system, and then we offer the documents coming in XML. And then we will verify these documents in a few months, and we will also translate all these documents in XML as well, and finally disseminate and publish. All of these is based on an XML system, and we are also in parallel developing a CMS system to store the XML content. All of this, as I say, is XML, and we will also apply digital signature. We have a parallel project ongoing in order to develop an interface to receive documents to digitally sign. This is the way we used to work whenever we have to draft a document. As you see, we have a lot of strange stuff for end users. These are the tags we use to identify the different parts of a document. There are several disadvantages of using this architecture. First of all, is layout oriented. That means whenever a user has to provide information about the text, the only medium he has by using Word is to work on layout. And often they do too much. They use the layout to pass some messages they shouldn't. There are a lot of manual operation. That means a big room for errors. When we speak about documents in Word, we speak about monolithic elements. That is also a difficulty for us. For example, when we receive amendments document with hundreds of amendments in 23 languages, we had to deliver group of amendments separated by language. And that's quite difficult when you had to treat documents based on Word. There is a very reduced collaboration and sharing activity, again, because we are working with Word, some redundancy, and because all the templates, we have 120 templates multiplied by 23 languages. The end user, they tend not to use the official templates, and that is also another problem. Which are the benefits of introducing XML? The time to draft, verify, and translate is drastically reduced, and we already experienced this for the drafting activity. I will spend some more words afterwards. The user, they have instant access to all the language versions. They don't have to find anymore inside the file system the good language version. Quality is automatically improved because the user, they just focus on, for example, the amendments changing the text. All the rest is taken in charge by the system. And then also, the amendments are stored in a database. This opens the door for any subsequent activities we want to do, for example, reports. It's very easy to use. In average, the user, in order to amend document by using this system, they need no more than half an hour training. And some other interesting effects. At European Parliament, I was also in charge of a project aimed to describe all the official documents in XML. We did this. We had today an XML schema that covers all the documents of the Parliament, that are the reports, that are the Commission proposal, that are the Council documents. All these documents, including the amendments, are now described in Accomantoso. That is the standard we decided to select. I will now go to the live demo, hoping everything is working. So now I'm connected in remote to a local server in Brussels. What you see here is one of the two tools based on XML. So what we basically do, whenever we receive a proposal from the Commission, we XMLize this proposal, and we inject the proposal inside this system. the deputies, their assistant, the committees, secretariats, and the political group secretariat, they use this tool to make and modify amendments. They don't use any more Word. We introduced the tool in January 2010. We roll out during several months to all the committees and then the plenary. And so far, we have 120,000 amendments created by using AT4M. So what you see here are, is a reduced list of available procedures for treating. What the user do, they select the procedure and they open the editor. What it's actually doing the tool is opening the XML version, and this is the original text available for amendments. This is what I called an active text. That means whenever the user they move or over the text, they see some action they can do. And also, more important, the system is able to recognize where they are. I'm actually on recital 7. I want to amend this recital. I just select the recital. I get these double column windows. And actually, I have the same text on the right and left side. I can decide to replace a word. So let's save the amendment. And here it is. So the amendment is created in a very few steps. We use a double column notation. Normally, the words who are deleted, they are shown in bold italic on the left side, and new words, they are shown on bold italic on the right side. The important thing here is that the amendment has been created automatically. The user, they don't have to focus anymore on the layout that is taken in charge by the system, as well as the metadata. So the amendment number, the name of a deputy, normally is automatically added in case the system recognizes me as working for a deputy. Otherwise, I can easily add a deputy. And then also the position is there, so it's an amendment on recital 7. We can make all type of amendment. We can add a new article, for example, or a new paragraph. We can delete stuff. What I want to show you also is that we manage the naming convention for all the type of elements, for all the type of languages. For example, if I want to add here, you see I get only the actions that are available in this context. I'm on the level of paragraph. I can only add paragraph or subparagraph or points. If I go back and I go to the level of an article, I get some other contextual possibilities. Here I can add an article, for example. And if I add a new point here, this is a new point. I get this amendment with this notation. This is a new point. Let's go to the French version. Here I have all the language version of this document. Let's go to the French version. Add a new element. And you see, I get this pre-filled element A, B. This is automatically added. That means that the user, they don't have to care anymore also about the fact that in French we use a different notation than English, etc., etc. Again, room for errors has been extremely reduced, and we already appreciated the result of this. What we are going to introduce now this is a new system that will be in production in 1 month. We are extending the chain. So what I just show you is the creation, the drafting of amendments. Now we are extending this to the legal and linguistic verification of amendments. So this is another tool that is provided to these services that allows there to access amendments created by the previous tool in XML. And what they can do, they can access the existing amendment for a specific dossier, and they can add modification in track changes. So I hope it's working, yes. So here we introduce even some more possibilities. For example, the legal and linguistic expert, they can decide to add comments on some part of the text. For example, this is not very clear. I just added a comment. And all the users of this system, they can actually add comments in real time. So that is also an interesting feature that is available in a web environment. That to show you that the limits we have by providing web tools, they are very restricted today. Normally there should be some guy there in Brussels who is also able to add comments on the same amendment.
You have to wrap up, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so comments, track changes, I won't go through all of these, but you see we also develop track changes for these people. They can decide to activate or deactivate track changes. To sum up, what we cover so far is the creation of amendments, and I would say 98% of the users today use this system to draft amendments. That is to say that the amendments in European Parliament, they are created natively in XML. They can export this amendment in XML by using Acumantoso. We are extending the chain to the verification process, and the objective, the final objective we have is to arrive to cover also the production of documents and reports with similar tools, so that user will be provided with web tools and everything will stay on XML. And of course, the final objective of European Parliament is also to produce an XML version of all the reports to be disseminated over Europal and also VoteWatch, etc., etc. I'm finished, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Ashok Hariharan. He's program officer, I think, or not sure about Africa Parliament Action Plan. He's a colleague in the United Nations, so he will make a presentation on, it's not a parliament, of course, so we made an effort to show what the project is actually doing. While he gets prepared, any one questions to Claudio Fabiani about this presentation? Is there any question? One question, yes? You are not Mark Bosk, but anyway.
No, I'm not. I'm Doro Francesco from VoteWatch. And I obviously have some questions for Claudio Fabiani. First of all, some questions for clarification. Is this system already finished or is it still under testing? If it is it finished already? Or
So AT4M, as I say, is in production since January 2010. And as I say, 120,000 amendments have been created by using this system. But if your question is about, can you get this amendment in XML? The answer is not yet, because as I say, we are extending this to the verification. That is, the amendments created by AT4M we cannot guarantee they are the final version. They pass through the legal and linguistic verification afterwards. And we will cover this in XML in a few months.
Sure, but the information, is it accessible only from inside European Parliament, or could it be made accessible also for the outsiders?
Once we can guarantee that these amendments in XML, they are the final version, they will be published.
Okay.
Okay.
Ashok?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Ashok Hariharan, and I'm going to make a presentation about a tool that we are developing called Bungeni Editor. So just a bit about the project, like a couple of bullets. I'm from, I work for Africa iParliaments. We are an initiative to help African parliaments to better fulfill their democratic functions using ICT tools and technologies. And one of the things that we have been building is a suite of open source applications to be used by Parliament. And this suite of open source applications is called Bungeni, which is basically a Swahili word which means inside Parliament. So this tool covers typical Parliament aspects like parliamentary workflows, bill drafting, agenda, minutes, and debate record production. So just to jump into it, this is essentially what the Bungeni editor looks like. You can see it looks like a normal word processor with, let me just move on. I'm going to explain what the UI looks like. So just some brief bullets explaining what the editor is about. It is a legislation drafting and markup application. Its main goal is actually XML production. It's targeted at debate records, Hansard, bills, judgments, and it can be adapted to any other document type being used by Parliament. It's fully customizable. It's got like a XML configuration interface to change the behaviors and actions, and it's multilingual. It's I-18N compatible. And we use an open source license, and the whole application is cross-platform. It'll run on Windows, it'll run on Linux. So just on XML editors, there's the whole XML editor world is split across two philosophies. So I've tried to explain both the philosophies here and on which side of the philosophical barrier we lie on. So there's two schools of thought. One is XML editors should be built around word processors because that is what most end users are familiar with. They have been drafting debates, they've been drafting bills, and so on in word processors, so we should give them word processors and somehow be able to extract XML out of them. The other school of thought is to build a ground-up XML editor, tie it to a schema, and restrict the user in terms of what they can do. But as I've explained, there's a shorter learning curve, there's a more expensive learning curve with with a ground-up XML editors. You have to retrain the users and change their mindset and so on. So with our philosophy, we we imply semantics. We don't explicitly tie down the user into what they can do. So unlike normal XML editors where they're restricted by what the schema allows. So like in our case, technical validity is only an end product. It's not an edit point goal. So unlike XML editors where XML validity is from start to finish. So this is what I've called it, that ours is more user oriented, while typical XML editors are more engineer oriented, where they are tied to schemas and so on. So some of the features, we use a standard word processor. We've built everything on the OpenOffice platform. It's like a standard free open source word processor. So our tool is like an extension on top of OpenOffice. We use a markup paradigm which is identical to formatting a word processor document. So just what the users have been doing before, they've been going and highlighting headings, they've been going and creating sections in a document. They've been styling specific text. They've been putting links into the document. That's the same paradigm that we have used. The editor is fully configurable, customizable. We also integrate with other legislative systems. This could mean normally when you're marking up a document, you want to get metadata about your members of parliament, metadata about what are the bills being published in parliament, what are the identifiers of the bills. So we have a standard REST-based interface to like pull in this metadata. That's what I mean by integration with legislative systems, but it could be any system. We are also fully standards-based. Since we use OpenOffice, like the main document format which the user edits is actually open document format. This is an OSS promoted format, and it's supported by more than one word processor. We use RDF to store metadata. RDF is been supported by ODF since version 1.2. So we use RDF to like encapsulate the metadata within the document. And our output format is like Akumantoso, which is the standard we have been promoting and which Claudio just mentioned that they also have started using. So that's about the standards. So just on the user interface now, so you can see that like the part highlighted in green is like a standard open office window, and the part on the right is like a formatting actions palette. So instead of using the normal styling tools, the user just gets this kind of tabbed interface on the right-hand side here, and they use that to mark up the document. We've also done a few improvements on the standard OpenOffice interface where it wasn't multi-document. You had to open each document in a separate window. So with this interface, we've been able to convert it to a tabbed interface so users can work on multiple documents from the same window. We've got this customizable action bar on the right. So this will change. If you're editing a debate record, you will get one set of actions. If you're editing a bill, you'll get a different set of actions, and so on. So all this is customizable and like configurable via XML, via XML configuration. And we have and these actions are rule-based and they're context-sensitive. Like if you highlight some text here, based on the context that you're highlighting the text in, you will find some actions are enabled and some actions are disabled. So we have a small rule-based syntax kind of language which is interpreted at runtime, and these actions get enabled or disabled as you want. And we also provide structural views, so you don't lose out on like a typical hierarchical view that you would get with an XML document. Because we are applying extra semantic metadata to the styling, we are able to pull out like a structural view that you would typically see in a hierarchical XML document. So we are trying to keep both sides happy. So yeah, that's the structural view I meant. So, and we provide other things like in-document rule checking. So there are some things which which don't make sense to like validate at the schema level, because schema level validation is like a very technical activity. But you want to add some semantic rules to the document saying if like somebody marks up a debate date, that date should not fall beyond perhaps another date in the document, maybe a debate end date. So they can't specify like incompatible dates when they mark up. So those kind of validations you can do with this kind of semantic checking. And also things like what is the order of markup? Can you put the preface at the end of the document, or can you put the conclusions at the beginning of the document? So those kind of rules can be specified by this kind of in-document rule checking. Then I had mentioned before that we also provide for external metadata integration. Since it's an open source tool, it's meant to be used in like different parliaments, different contexts. So people could have different kinds of data sources. Somebody could be running a database system where they have a list of members of parliament. Others could be having a parliamentary information system. So we've provided a transparent interface to access external metadata. It's a REST-based API, and you can write connectors for different data sources, and you can customize it without changing the source code of the editor. Finally, it allows you to transform this semantically rich like open document format document into a Komantoso XML. We use standard technologies like XSLT, and we've got a XSLT pipeline process that we use to convert the ODF to a Komantoso. And you could also transform it to other formats. It's not just specifically a Komantoso, but you can export it to any other formats that you want. So just to put it in perspective, until now we've just been talking about marking up XML documents, but what is the context of all this markup? So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what the context is. So as I had mentioned earlier, we have like a Bungeni suite of applications, and the Bungeni editor is just one small component in that big suite of applications. So here I've given like a diagram which tries to explain all the different components in the suite and where exactly the editor falls. So we have a parliamentary workflow system called Bungeni, which is meant to be used by members of parliament and the clerks in parliament to basically automate all their parliamentary processes. So members of parliament would get online onto this system and submit their questions. It would go to a clerk who would then send it to the speaker and so on, and it would go through all the document lifecycle. So that's for members of parliament. But then this web-based interface is not really suitable for typical drafting activities, like if you have to draft a 2,000-page bill. Doing it online is not I think the technology has not really reached the point where you can process a 2,000-page document online. So they would use the Bungeni editor to basically draft the bill, mark it up, convert it to XML, and push it into this workflow system that we have, which then uses the XML document to display to the user. They can submit annotations, so on, the whole process. So this gets submitted to an XML repository. We use an XML database called Exist. It's an open source native XML database, and we have built an institutional portal interface based on Exist to provide access to these archived XML documents. Of course, the end user sees everything as HTML, since somebody mentioned, but it's also possible to access the underlying XML format. And then this system also feeds into a citizens portal. We have a split between institutional access and citizens access, so it's available to different users. So just shifting to the repository, I had mentioned something called a repository. So just to complete the cycle, I want to show what happens to the XML documents once they go out of the editor and they get fed into the repository. So this is an interface on the repository. It's just a list of questions. So you can see it's like a web-based interface. You can search and you can filter, you can search and sort on your listings. You can actually click on a question and view it, and you would get this is what you would basically get in your web browser. So you get these different tabs here. You can see the whole timeline of what this question went through when it was in Parliament. You can get additional metadata details about the question. You can see what other committees or political groups this question was assigned to. And you can see associated documents and versions of this question as it went through its life cycle in Parliament. And you can see here, there's a link here. There's a member called member P103. That's actually a member of Parliament's name, but this is automatically generated data. That's why you're seeing a funny name like that. So the user can just click there and he can get a profile page about the question. So that's the speaker of the Parliament of Kenya. I've just put an example picture there. So, and here there's a link called Parliamentary Activities, and if you click on that, like you can see all the activities that this Member of Parliament has actually contributed to. So here is a list of agenda items, bills, table documents, questions, motions, and also debates. So you would also get the debates and like any other documents he's contributed to. So if you click there, you get returned back to the point where you began from. You started from the question, you went to the Member of Parliament, you saw all the activities he had contributed to, and now you're back to the question. So just to show the last...
wrap up.
Yeah, just a couple of more slides. So just to show the last tab, you can see versions, you can see events, and you can see attached files to the question. And you can also click on these icons here to get the same document in different formats. You can see it in XML, you can get it out in PDF and other formats. We have also started working on managing amendments and consolidation. We have actually been in talks with Claudio here to see if we can make use of the amendments management system, since it's based on the same format that we have standardized on. So this is how it would work. It would work in a similar I think the workflow would be very similar to what he described, but just the application pushing the amendments would be different. It would be our application Bungeni, and there would be the Bungeni editor in its place. That's it.
Thank you very much. First question, please. You. Spence.
You mentioned that it was open source.
Yeah.
Is there currently a developer community?
There is a small developer community. It's not very big, but if like other people are interested, I can give you the link. Like all the code is actually on Google Code, and there's some documentation there. But we are looking to grow the community and find other people who are interested in. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks.
Hi, Andrew Mandelbaum from NDI. How many parliaments are currently using Bungeni, and what are some of the challenges to implementation or adoption of Bungeni?
Okay, at the moment, there is no parliament which is, which is actually using it. But we've had expressions of interest. I would say very strong expressions of interest from at least 3 or 4 parliaments. This is all in Africa, since the goal of the project is to focus on Africa. I would say we've had very strong expression. In fact, just 10 days ago, we were in Mauritius, and we met the clerk there. We met the IT manager there, and it was the clerk who was actually pushing. We need this system because they had tried to tender for a system, and the costs were like very high to like buy something off the shelf or like get something developed. Then also we've had like a strong expression of interest from the South African Parliament, who are looking to do a pilot sometime soon. They're going to start with a smaller department, just the questions department, and then they're looking to expand it to other departments.
If I may add, we have Uganda, for instance, that is also another country where we are actually uploading currently the information. And I see Avinash here, we have Suriname that is interested. And the problem is not to find the interest, actually. The problem is now to find the right way to deploy the system. Because even if it took years to do the system, that was probably the easiest part. So when we were mentioned the community, for instance, that is a critical step that we are going to build. When we were in Mauritius, we met with the University of Mauritius, with the IT department. And so whenever we go to a country, we also try to involve the public university. If you think in terms of brain power that is wasted in the IT university. We hire several interns every host several interns, and they always do library management information system. You know, I don't know how many. There is no more library, and they keep doing library management information system. Just if you think that if it was possible to use that brain power, that there is 1,000 of days of committed student to work on a public project, like Bungeni or any other things, so that see that this brain power is not wasted, and you are a student, you are consuming public resources, and you actually contribute back with your brain power to university. So we find a lot of interest. We are working in Kenya, and we have been working with university in Nairobi. In university there are actually 3 or 4 that are very good university, and they are interested. So one difficulty is that there are several difficulties. One difficulty is trying to build a local community. Another difficulty is that we are not a company. We are a project. We cannot sign a service level agreement with Parliament. We are not in a position, and we are not even able to do. So we have developed a model where Parliament or Parliament Uganda is hiring people, but at the same time they have a company that have been providing support to them, and we are involving them in the deployment of the system, so that it's not, the know-how is not just transferred to the Parliament, that at times is a shaky kind of environment, because IT people is a very valuable commodity, and Parliament find difficult in Africa to retain them, because if you're very good, you make more money working for the even we as UN, we have problem to retain people, because multinational like a telephone company, mobile company, or banks can pay good money, actually more than a developer will be paying in Europe, for instance. So the third level of problem that we are facing is that the demand that we make to Parliament is a totally different kind of demand that developing assistance has made to Parliament up to now. For instance, let's talk about this conference. The demand that this conference made to Parliament is to send somebody for 2 days and rewarding them with a trip or whatever, and come here and make a presentation. This is, it could be challenging, but it's a very different kind of demand that say we have to sit, we have to plan, we are engaging in a modernization process, we are engaging in change of work practice. It takes a lot more of involvement, mental involvement and managerial involvement to adopt things. And it is, honestly, it's an exercise that we are both learning to dialogue with Parliament, and Parliament in Africa at least. We are not generalizing. The Parliament of South Africa is a totally different kind of experience. They have a management process that is very structured, very articulated, but we have other parliament that are not. So these are the challenges. But there are opportunities, as I said. Universities see opportunity. There is no one parliament per country.
Can you?
Okay, just okay. Nothing else. It's always cutting me off. What can I do? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have Tom Bruce? I'm just curious, and I'll pose this question both to the panelists and to Tim at my left here, as to where, for those of you who have implemented these sorts of systems in multiple parliaments, where have you found that differences in parliamentary procedure, parliamentary structure, have led to the greatest technical points of friction in systems implementation? What's hard to do, I guess, is my basic question. What's hard about one size fits all?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. Mostly it's about preferences and emphases rather than true technical capabilities. There's a lot more we have in common than we have that's different. That's the first thing. And that's even true between European traditions and English-speaking traditions. But certainly within English-speaking tradition, there's a lot more that's similar than is different. And minor differences in parliamentary rules are all about defining a different work process. But in most systems that manage work processes, that's a configuration. It's not, it's data, it's not the system. While the order of things in a bill might be different across different jurisdictions, most bills have the same sorts of things. They have commencement provisions, they have substantive provisions, they have amending provisions, they have a title, they have metadata about who introduced it, what status it's at, and all of that can be managed with style sheets and moving things around if you need to change the order. So I think we have a lot more in common than we have differences. In terms of the friction, I think most of the friction is about user preferences. So the most flexibility you can build into the user interface and the editing tools, the more acceptable a more generic tool is going to be.